Stop me, 'cause I'm having a good time, having a good time. I'm a shooting star leaping through the sky like a tiger, defying the laws of gravity. I'm a racing car.
Hi everybody, welcome to part 3 of our look at the Spiteclaw Swarm expansion for Warhammer Underworld Shadespire. We're continuing our look at the unique cards that Spiteclaw's Swarm can use and how that faction particularly works. Previously we looked at the heroes themselves, the different objectives that they're going for, and their upgrades. The objectives don't seem as overtly powerful as anything we've seen in any other faction. They definitely seem to be a high skill cap faction to play as. This is very similar to Sepulchral Guard. In fact, a lot of the abilities are literally stolen from the Sepulchral Guard. However, the upgrades started to show us a bit more of a grand strategy coming through for the faction. A very characterful tendency to expend the lives of your chaff and then restore them to the field. However, you also run into the problem of spending actions just like the Sepulchral Guard do, as well as giving away glory points to your enemy by feeding them easy kills. But without further ado, let's look further at their unique ploys to see what actually makes Spiteclaw's Swarm tick. So first we have Aversion to Death and Reaction. Play this after an attack action that takes a friendly fighter out of action. Push up to 2 friendly fighters, 1 hex each. So again, this is another thing based on losing one of your guys. I mean, previously I have somewhat disparaged this as a strategy because of how much you lose when you're losing one of your characters. You're giving up the actions required to get them into position and then return them to the field, and you're also giving up a glory point for your enemy. The sheer amount of effects that the Skaven have based on death of their units, it forces one to consider that this is going to happen. You are going to lose your chaff. Probably more so than any other faction except for the Sepulchral Guard. But so far we haven't seen a lot of ways to, like the Sepulchral Guard have, to return them to the field without having to spend an action. I believe the Undead have 2 cards that do that. But that being said, this again is our first look at Ploys. Again, I haven't seen any of these cards prior to this recording, so that is something we're going to want to look for. All that being said, being able to reposition your rats after losing one is good, but you already have a really high movement value. All of your guys start at 5. It does allow you to reinforce a defensive line after losing a guy, but it's a very corner case specific card. I don't know that I can necessarily build a strategy around it, and as a result, it kind of puts it into the general use area. And there are so many other great ploy cards for general use. This kind of reminds me of a grimmer version of Stormforge Tactics for the Stormcast. I don't know. This seems like a tricky card to use. Again, I think this is very much going to be something that's going to show up in a lot of very advanced players' decks. And it's going to take a very cunning user to be able to get the most out of this. Alright, Skaven Courage. Play this if there are at least 3 friendly fighters adjacent to the same enemy fighter. One of those friendly fighters can make an attack action. Alright. So this is great. I'm a big fan of any ability that lets you get extra activations of any sort, any extra attacks, extra moves. And given the high mobility of Spiteclaw's Swarm, and all sorts of other benefits that you're already getting for outnumbering an enemy, this is really going to be critical. I think this is going to be probably in every Skaven deck. This, to me, this is the having a good time of Skaven decks. Okay. Frenzied Stabbing. The first attack action with a range of 1 or 2 in the next activation has +1 damage. Okay. That's solid. Most of your attacks seem to be coming in around the 2 damage mark, the 1 or 2 damage mark, so this is going to be very useful. Again, those 1 and 2 hits, you've got them all over the place, and they're going to put your enemies in check for a 1-hit kill. This is going to make that a little bit easier. Pretty solid. Heightened Caution. Roll an extra defense dice for the first friendly fighter to be targeted by an attack action in the next activation. Okay. So we're seeing a lot of these where this is very similar to the new Fireslayer card that is going to reduce damage from an incoming attack. There's everybody's favorite Khorne card, Insensate, for when you can see this huge attack coming. This is probably the weakest of the cards that we've seen like that, because all you're getting is an extra die, which is probably the worst thing that I could say about it. You know, as Shadespire is a game very much like chess in that victory is going to result in being able to see a few turns into the future. So cards like this are going to be critical. However, while there's not a huge amount of benefit from this, there's also not a lot of moving parts. It doesn't have to be on anybody specific. It's just, you know, something bad's coming, and this can help mitigate it. Momentary Baldness. Choose a friendly fighter adjacent to 2 or more friendly fighters. That fighter makes a charge action. Okay, this is more orc stuff that have gone into the Skaven. Friendly fighter adjacent to 2 or more friendly fighters. Okay, so more stuff built around keeping the Skaven together in a tight pack. You're getting a charge out of sequence, which is outstanding. The big problem that you have, though, is that you're not going to be delivering much with that charge because of the low damage values that you're getting from the Skaven. Very much like the Sepulchral Guard, you're going to end up having to charge with your 2 more powerful characters, in this case Scritch or Kirk. But again, it works great for orcs, and I'm really interested to see that functionality popping up in other warbands. I kind of wonder what this is going to do to orcs, because they're kind of losing their specific thing that they had. I'll be real interested to see how the universal cards in this expansion and the Chosen Axes affect Ironjaw's builds. Musk of Fear. Choose a friendly fighter and put them on guard. Okay, well, so yeah, it's great that you can put somebody on guard outside of spending an activation on it, because that's always painful to do. Again, you only have 12 activations in any given game of Shadespire. Having to spend one of them is a very important choice. Being able to do this in the midst of, you know, the action phase without spending an activation is going to be great. And also consider that when inspired, a lot, in fact, all of these Skaven go to 2 defense dice. So putting them on guard makes them incredibly resilient. This is great for... there's a similar ability for Stormcast. It works great for them. The only thing that I would say is it works great for Stormcast because at any given time you're only presenting 3 targets to your enemy. When you're presenting 5 targets to your enemy, this may be a swing and a miss. However, if you know that a particular one of your Skaven is going to be a priority target, for example, Kirk, your Scritch, or somebody on an important objective, this can be a great play. I don't see a lot bad about this card, especially because it has so few moving parts. It's going to be easy to incorporate into any strategy. I can definitely see this showing up in most Spiteclaw decks. Okay, nervousscrabbling. Choose a friendly fighter. They switch places with an adjacent fighter. Okay, so previously this is something that people would do with confusion. This is a little bit more restricted because one of the people involved needs to be a friendly fighter. But having 2 confusion effects is super useful. This is a great way to steal an objective without having to, you know, kill the incredibly difficult to kill thing that's on it. And with a lot more cards in the meta preventing knockback from being hit, this is going to be a great way to steal objectives. I'm noticing here, though, there are not a lot of cards for Spiteclaw Swarm that are specific to objectives, but there are cards about killing and being killed, which is a little bit surprising. I had expected a little bit more of an objective focus from Spiteclaw Swarm, with all of their speed and their tendency to steal things. Though it's worth mentioning that there are some interesting opportunities for counterplay when your enemies are going for objectives. You can kind of pull them apart with the objectives and then swarm down each one. The question is, are you going to be able to do that in 12 activations? So yeah, again, this the general feeling that I get from Spiteclaw Swarm is very much like the Sepulchral Guard, in it's a little bit hard to tell right off the bat, as if you're a new player, exactly what you're supposed to be doing with them. At the same time, though, that also means that you're not going to be as tied into doing one thing, which is a problem that the Ironjaws have. Okay. So, next is Scratching in the Shadows. Choose an enemy fighter and push them 1 hex. Okay, so this is the same as your Peal of Thunder for Stormcast, same as the new card that the Fire Slayers have that do the same effect. A little bit more specific because it needs to affect an enemy fighter. But again, this is super useful. It can stack with other cards that force enemy movement. Use this late in the turn order to knock somebody off of an objective. Lots of tricksy maneuvers, which I guess we should expect from Skaven. It's a generally neat card. I always like stacking up the abilities on useful universal cards that we've had in other sets. Alright, Sudden Skittering. Double the move characteristic of the first friendly fighter to make a move action in the next activation. They may not make a charge action. Once they have moved, they cannot be activated again in this phase. Alright, so your guys already have a move value of 5. This will put them up to 10. Again, I'm seeing this as a late turn objective steal or sudden change in the board state, when you can essentially run one of your guys all the way across the board into a place that your opponent did not have an expectation that you would get to and has not set up the resources to affect. Given that they're going to be so much faster than every other faction with the exception of Khorne Bloodbound, and even faster than them, honestly, I'm seeing a lot of potential for a keep away style deck. I've seen, a lot of people try to do this with Stormcast. I personally don't think it's a great idea, but I could see it being a really great idea with Skaven. It's interesting. I don't know that I would put this in every deck unless that was a specific strategy that I was going for. Alright, and finally we have There Are Always More. Okay, so this is that card that I was looking for. It's a similar effect to a Sepulchral Guard effect. This is your free resurrection. Choose one friendly fighter that is out of action other than Scritch or Kirk. Remove all wound tokens from them, place them on any starting hex. So again, you've got that effect. There's suddenly rats in your backfield. Very simple. It does mean that you're not spending an activation to get one of your chaff rats back. And the extra ability to put them on any starting hex is just icing on the cake. Again, it's planning to constantly recycle your units is a bit of a trap. You don't want to spend too many activations on bringing dead rats back into play, or getting them killed in the first place, because you are going to be giving away glory, and as a result, you're going to be giving your enemy upgrades they can be using to kill more rats. And as more and more powerful upgrades enter the game, that's definitely going to be something that you're going to want to very strongly consider as you choose to expend your chaff. Okay, well that is all of the cards for Spiteclaw's Swarm, the unique ones to that particular faction. Again, we're definitely seeing a lot more subtlety in where the whammy comes from in this particular faction. They're not as obvious as what you're going to get from Ironjaws or Khorne Bloodbound or the Fire Slayers. But I'm definitely seeing the potential for a lot of different builds. I'm seeing the potential for a very killy deck that's going to be based around forcing your enemies into isolation and then slowly taking them out. I can see a build that is based entirely around keeping away from the enemy for the entire game, there are a few objectives that are going to support this kind of play, and it may be really annoying for your opponent to deal with. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this look at the Spiteclaw Swarm, and I hope it's been useful to you. Please feel free to put your comments down below if you agree or disagree with anything that we've said here. Keep in mind, these are my first impressions of what the cards do immediately upon looking at them. So there's been no immediate research. I'm sure over time people are going to discover interesting card interactions. In future videos, we'll be looking at the different universal cards that are going to be affecting the meta that come with the Spiteclaw Swarm expansion. But thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.